We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And Tom let me know via text message before we started this podcast. He had quite the accomplishment this morning.
I did.
It's like a great date for it to happen, but discovered something that might completely change your purchasing decision. Just a shocking discovery was made by Tom. So maybe he can fill us in, or maybe we're just teasing for a slightly future thing if he has something else to say first.
No, we can go ahead and say it.
Okay.
So those of you that have been following the saga of the SOUNDPEATS, what is it called? The Space headphones, the ones
Yes.
that are supposed to last them 100 and something hours or whatever. And I used them and we talked about them a bunch and stuff. They finally got down to 10%.
Okay.
And when they got down to 10%, they started not screaming, but announcing in my ear that the battery was low. Mm-hmm. And they did it more often than I liked. I was like, oh, this is getting irritating. But I was like, let's just see.
Yeah.
Let's just see how long it'll take before it dies. So I've been listening to them it started doing that last night when I was listening to them while cooking. And then this morning I was working and I was listening to them and it was doing it. Yeah. And then they shut themselves off. Ooh. I was like, oh, did we finally kill him? Did we finally kill him?
Right.
So I turned them back on.
Which is some evidence that they weren't literally completely 100% dead. Yeah.
Yes. And then it showed me 9%.
Yeah.
But, these headphones have historically, it overestimates how much battery is left when you first turn them on.
Okay.
So I kept the SOUNDPEATS app open and watched it drop to 7% pretty quickly. And it stayed there. And I listened for another half an hour with it telling me that the battery was low. And it didn't shut itself off again. I finally gave up. I have given up. Okay. And I plugged them in finally after. Now, if you look on the website, you will see that the date for the published of the article is February 22nd. That is not true. That was the update. Okay. When I updated the article, it was on February 22nd when they had that sale, which I don't know. I think it's probably over with at this point. The initial date was February 7th. Okay. Well, I think it was probably 6th, but we're going to say 7th because that's when I emailed the SOUNDPEATS person and said, hey, your review's up live.
Right.
And that is literally 3 months ago to the day.
That we're recording this podcast. You're hearing this a little bit later than that. It is
May 7th, and that was February 7th. And I have used them as much as anyone uses headphones in a normal manner, and probably more. Okay. If you're not taking them to work and using them all day long, if you're just like a person who uses them before and after work, sometimes, but not every day, but most days, who will throw them on for a half an hour and then put them down, whatever, and sometimes put them on for a couple hours or 3 hours or 4 hours and then put them down depending on the day and what you're doing. That's how I've been using them. Okay. For 3 solid months.
And to be clear, this is the first time Tom has ever plugged them in to charge, other than, initially out of the box. Did you charge them to full?
I did charge them out of the box.
Okay, so I did technically the second time they've ever been charged out of the box.
It's ludicrous. Yes. And Andrew texted me, I think, going on 2 months ago, telling me, oh, these other headphones that you sent me, these have got to have at least as good a battery as those because they're still going strong. I'm like, my man, you do not understand how long these headphones are going to last. 3 months. And they still had 7% on them. I think I could have listened for probably another 5 or 6 hours. I might have to keep turning them back on. But I at least 2. Okay, let's just be very, very pessimistic. Let's say 2 hours, 2 more hours.
Right. Which is as long as some wireless headphones last on a full charge.
Charge. It's insane how long these things have lasted. I am it feels criminal.
So the accomplishment is that you did manage to use it
I
to
did
the point
manage to do it finally. I almost gave up
where they powered themselves off. I mean, we got there. You were able to turn them back on and use them after that point, but they did eventually power themselves off.
They did.
And of course, what I'm saying about that is that the purchase decision changing thing of that is that the power off state happened before 0%, which,
Defective.
I mean,
defective.
Potentially unforgivable.
0 stars.
You know, because if you're expecting that you can go on a 4-month trip and not bring your charger, that might not be the case. You might have to charge these headphones quarterly. And I don't know if
that seems untenable.
Yeah,
that's an untenable situation.
You know, you're plugging.
They should have put the smallest little solar panel strip on the top, enough to catch the UV radiation that comes from the fluorescent lights in your office, and they would last another 8 hours.
Somewhere to strap in a booster. You know, you got to think about these things because, you know, you might be able to live with charging your Apple Watch 2 or 3 times a day to keep that thing going, but you know, having to plug these in.
That's a feature for Apple.
Having to plug these in every 3 months, having it potentially, you know, yell at you that the battery is getting low and actually powers itself off before it reaches the full 0. That's, I don't know. They overlooked that design flaw.
Just cannot believe how long these headphones have lasted. It feels like I'm making it up, and I am the one saying it, and I am the one that's like, I keep telling my family, I'm like, I don't understand how these headphones have you charged them? Has anybody nobody in this house plugs in anything
secretly?
Anyways, right? They don't plug in nothing. Like, they barely plug their own stuff in. They're sure not going to come behind me and like, oh, I bet Dad wants his headphones charged.
Plus, you would have looked at the app and seen that the number had actually gone up if someone had secretly charged them on you. So, no. So, SOUNDPEATS Space wireless headphones. Now, again, to be a little bit clear, you were not using the active noise cancellation. This was not. Yeah, so that will clearly make the battery go down faster than 3 months between charges. But if you
might only get 2 months out of it. I mean, I don't know how you're going to survive that.
Not using the active noise cancellation. That's the kind of... I mean, honestly, legitimately, joking aside, it could actually be a problem in the fact that you could very well misplace your charger in the meantime because you are clearly not having to keep track of it on a daily basis.
Depending on your age, you might not outlive the headphones. I mean, the battery on the headphones might live longer than you. It's ludicrous.
And again, they were what, $99, $89, something like that?
At the time, yeah. I don't know what they were. It claimed 123 hours. Yeah. And that seems, it's $90 MSRP.
There you go.
And then they were on sale for $50.
Well, that's our intro for this week.
$50.
Yeah.
You're paying 50 cents. Like, if you never charged them.
Yeah. You just
used them and threw them away, you'd be paying 50 cents an hour.
If you lost the charger, that might cost more than the headphones. So it might be cheaper to get an entire new set than to purchase a separate charger.
So dumb. And they're comfortable and they sound decent. You know what I mean? I mean, how good do you want them to sound for 123 hours? You want them to sound decent. You don't necessarily need them to sound the best. Yeah. Like, these headphones here that I'm wearing are electrostatic headphones. Or planar magnetic headphones, and they sound they're very good, but they're also very critical, right? Okay. You put in something like you're listening to a YouTube video, you're like, oh.
Tom's got some. For those not watching the video, Oppo planar magnetic headphones. Remember when Oppo made planar magnetic headphones? That's going back some years.
That's going back a couple of years, yes. So the Oppos, it's the smaller ones, the PM3s or whatever they were called, and very good headphones, but you know you almost have to be a little choosy with what you listen to.
Right.
The SOUNDPEATS Space, they're just good, solid sounding headphones.
Okay.
A little bassy, if I remember correctly. Well, I don't know what I said in a review. They sound kind of a little bassy compared to these. They definitely are. And but just forgiving. You can listen to whatever you want. Okay. You know, they're Bluetooth. The volume control is very easy to access right there on the has a dedicated A&C button, so you can switch it on and off very easily without having to like long press something or some crap like that. I mean, I can't really recommend them enough.
Yeah.
What fault are you going to find with a headphone that costs somewhere between $50 and $90, depending on whether or not they're on sale? They last for months at a time. They're comfortable and they sound good. Yeah. I mean, maybe not the most critical listening headphones you ever want to have, but you're not going to sit there and go, oh my God, these things, ugh. Like, I've listened to headphones like that where I've been like, ugh. These are so inaccurate as to be unpleasant. Way too bass heavy is very, very typical with some headphones, and these are not that. So
but they clearly do need an app update to get that battery life accurate. It's number one.
I'm going to be writing a strongly worded letter.
They better find out about it. Okay.
God, what a ludicrous amount of battery life.
Yeah,
like
I still don't really understand how that works, but
they should weigh like 20 pounds.
Right,
I feel like that should be like the
whole
old
bunch of lithium in
school lithium ion. Like you should be getting like radiation poisoning from these things. That's how. Like, it doesn't seem like science. Like, how is it working? All right, Rob. We can talk about. I could make jokes about these headphones all day because of how much I like them. But what did you watch this week?
Yeah, what we watched. So I will say, I didn't want to jinx anything and talk about it beforehand, but we are through round number 1 of the NHL Stanley Cup Playoffs, and the Vancouver Canucks got through round 1. They defeated the Nashville Predators. I was very, very happy because the Nashville crowd, when they're playing at home, they always do some chants in the crowd, very much jeering the opposition's goaltender whenever they get scored on. It really, really annoys me, even when they're not playing the team that I cheer for. I just really dislike the chants that the Nashville crowd does. So I was super happy to have them defeated, and in the final game to have a shutout, so they never got to do their stupid chants. They never had the opportunity because it was a shutout win, 1-0 win. So congratulations to Vancouver Canucks. That was a far better showing already than any of us were really anticipating for this year. They're on to the second round. It's gonna be tough, but yeah, these have been good playoffs. I also find it a little bit unseemly that the NHL overall, the scheduling department, if no one else, seems to be just like, yeah, the New York Rangers are going to win the cup this year. We've decided ahead of time we're going to give them every possible advantage, including letting them start their second round before the first round was completed for the other teams. Like as though a little extra rest might not help an athletic team in a really, really tough bracket competition. Did not like that. That's pretty crooked. But anyway, they seem to be determined. So I'll get away from the NHL for those who don't care about that. Watch 2 movies, and I'm debating which one I should talk about first because this is going to be a massive swing in tone, but I guess I'll go in the order that I watched them. Yes, huge change in tone and emotion here, but I watched The Zone of Interest. It's available for streaming on Amazon Prime Video right now.
What is that about?
Yes, so this is loosely based on a novel of the same name. This is a tale in, I believe it's 1943, of a Nazi German family who literally lives on the other side of the wall of Auschwitz.
Ugh.
Yeah.
That sounds bleak.
Oh, it is. Yes. And so the novel was a fictionalized story. They used non-real names and sort of told like an interpersonal tale. There was like kind of like a suspected affair and stuff that was going on in the novel, and it was told that with this unusual and very disturbing setting. When they adapted this to become a movie, basically the writer-director, which is Jonathan Glazer, he was researching where this, the novelization, sort of what it was based on, and more or less just said, oh, the real life story, the real people who lived in this house, that's maybe the more interesting story, and decided to make the movie based on the real life family there, the Hoos family, that lived in that house, and filmed it in an interesting way. I saw a little bit of behind the scenes, and he literally just set up static cameras, almost like surveillance footage, except higher quality than normal surveillance cameras, but set up cameras, just static cameras in the house, had the actors just go through their day. And, there's children in the house, there's visitors to the house, there's servants in the house, and had them just sort of go through the day all simultaneously, not shooting individual scenes, and then put the movie together afterward. So it really is like daily life. And of course, the phrase, the banality of evil, just the mundane day-to-day, these are normal people, but living in an unbelievable condition, in an unbelievable location at an unbelievable time. And of course, the question that people always ask, how could the Holocaust have happened? How could people, normal people, actually carry these things out, go through that? And that is what this movie is depicting. It's depicting how normal people that you or I could interact with these people today, and it wouldn't seem that out of place if we weren't aware of the setting and what was going on. And so this movie never shows you inside Auschwitz. It never explicitly talks about what's going on. That is the point, is to have it all as this horrible, oppressive background to everything. These little indications far away in the shots in the background, to give you some idea, the sound of a train, but it's all off screen. And just seeing these people's daily life as they carry on what is a very mundane, normal daily life. And that is the point of the movie. It is, in my opinion, almost critical that you do watch this in a very capable home theater, because the sound is so important. Because
it's all off screen. So many things are off screen.
It's all off screen. The constant din of the noise of Auschwitz that is 100% throughout this movie, and very purposefully so. You notice it at the beginning and then become inured to it. You start to not notice the din of these sounds in the background to bring you into that same mind space as this family where they are just ignoring it. They don't notice it anymore. It's like going nose blind to a bad smell in your house, or not noticing that your, smoke detector is chirping every 13 seconds because the battery is low. It's like, how do you not notice these things? Well, when you're just in it all day, every day, you don't notice those sounds anymore. And it does an excellent job of getting the audience to not notice what's going on in the background, just like this family is. So, this is a tough watch. It certainly makes you think. It sticks with you. And it takes a few little artistic ventures out. There's some scenes that are filmed in infrared. So it's got that very strange, almost negative image, black and white going on, with shots of a Polish girl who has nothing to do with this family. And it's, I honestly, I'm not completely certain myself, all the symbolism that was included in there, but it was juxtaposed with him telling bedtime stories to his children. And I will say, I don't want to do any sort of not letting people who haven't watched this movie yet discover for themselves. But yes, it recontextualizes some well-known children's stories that I will never think of in the same way again, having it told in this setting and with the images that were shown. So it's a tremendous movie. But yeah, obviously you're not watching it for entertainment value. It's something that should be watched, and should be watched with a very capable system. I think it's really, really important, because if you're just watching it on regular TV speakers, you might really miss a ton. Okay. So, massive tonal whiplash warning once again. The other movie that I watched this week was The Beekeeper, which is Jason Statham.
A revenge movie, like the you killed my something. Or whatever it is.
Very, very, very much. Of course, it's going to draw the comparisons to John Wick, that type of thing. And yes, it is. But this is, without any sort of apology for it, a Steven Seagal movie. That's what The Beekeeper is. It's that type of really cheesy dialogue, one-liners, terrible puns about bees, throughout. And
that's like the entire 90s.
That's what it is. This is a 90s action flick. The stoic hero who barely ever speaks. When he does, it's a one-liner or
Commando
a pun.
With Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That's right.
Cobra with Sylvester Stallone.
He never gets tired. He never takes a hit, even when he's fighting 25 Delta Force Army recruits, except of course when he goes up against the one nemesis who finally gets a punch in on him.
I don't understand why in all these movies, like, if somebody's holding a weapon like a knife or a sword or something like that, they can dodge everything. The minute that the sword or knife hits the ground, suddenly they're getting punched left and right. They can shake him off, but now they can't block anything. I'm like,
everyone line up, attack single file one at a time.
There's a song about that.
Absolutely could have been shot every second of this movie, but never was. But I want to say that I'm undecided whether it really tread the line and towed the line of, like, because the thing is, nobody in this movie is overtly playing it as a comedy, but it's clear that everyone who made this movie is aware that this is a 90s action movie, so it's not that they took it so seriously that you can't have a fun time and laugh at it. The filmmakers are clearly aware, but they also didn't quite lean into the comedy of it because it is played very seriously. And honestly, the opening 20 minutes or so of this movie, while the villains are ridiculously cartoonish, like, they played the whole setup of why he's going on this revenge. Like, they played that straight, and that part worked. You're like, yeah, I'm on board with this guy. Go get them all, man. go take them all out. I'm on board with that. So I mean, I give it a thumbs up for what it is. Like, yes, obviously don't go into this thinking that it's some kind of greater new plot or that it isn't cheesy as all get out. I was absolutely laughing at the movie many times, but having a fun time doing it. They did a kind of neat twist on, where the ladder of the bad guys leads up to. I didn't exactly see it coming a mile away, so I'm like, okay, kudos to that. So yeah, if that's the type of movie you want, then I can give a thumbs up to the Beekeeper. It is absolutely stupid and silly, but
that is exactly every review I've seen on this thing has been it's like it's probably the best action movie that's come out this year. But if you're looking for deep, this is not it.
Oh, and also, I mean, the action is shot really well.
Yes.
They feature the stunt performers. So, I mean, like, it's done with that level of respect for the craft, and it is shot really well. Like, it is never unclear what's going on.
Right.
There are, like, rapid camera movements, but it's not done in the way that it's so blurry you can't see. Like, the people do the stunt performer thing of, they pull out the knife and pause for a second so that you can, like, take stock of where everybody is, and now they're going to attack. So, I mean, it's not realistic, but it is clear. So, yeah, I give it that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So, all right. I watched nothing.
Yeah, that's why I took a little bit of extra time on it.
It will be clear as to why I watched nothing in a few minutes.
Okay.
But we were very busy just as a family. We had
you had all your family back home, so it's been
my
family
son's
time.
back home from college, and we're getting him kind of settled in. At my son's high school, they were doing Spam-A-Lot, which is a Monty Python. It was written by Eric Idle and somebody else or whatever, but it's a Monty Python the Holy Grail sort of stage production, which I guess was on Broadway. I think it was on Broadway, but now
I think
somehow they're able to do it at high schools, I guess. Somehow. Anyways, it was great. Loved it. It was surprising that they were able to do some of the things they were able to do, considering we live in Florida, and I'll leave that there. We also had a Derby party to go to on May the 4th. So for the Kentucky Derby, every year we have some friends that throw a Kentucky Derby party, and we go and wear hats. And it was so. I mean,
you weren't
I was
doing
just
a Star
busy.
Wars party, on May the 4th?
I was not. In fact, I should have realized it was May the 4th because I do have a Yoda cup, a baby Yoda cup I could have brought with me because you have to bring your own cup to this thing. So I got tired of doing dishes. But yes, I would have done that. But it was a very busy weekend, but also there were some other things going on, which we'll talk about in a second. Okay. So let's start the podcast first. Yeah. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to the website, find our show notes, our Flickr album, so you can follow along with the pictures that we're talking about, as well as links to any of the products or articles that we are referencing. Plus, sometimes we'll just put other links in there that we know will help you understand a little bit better some of the concepts. Plus, old episodes, you can listen to the audio right there if you don't want to, download the player app on your phone or computer or whatever. You can listen to it right there. Plus our older shows, if you so desire. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant, where you can see our recording sessions. That'll also have the pictures so that you don't have to figure out which one we're talking about in the Flickr.
That's
album.
right.
Even though Rob does a good job of putting them all in order, so should be very
I try.
Contact Rob directly, rob@avrant.com. His social media is at First Reflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. All right, let's thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and then you can send us a PayPal donation. And you can also go to patreon.com/AVRant podcast to become a monthly contributor. Every month I'll take a little bit of money from you and give most of it to us. And this month, or as of, this month, I guess. Mm-hmm. So it was the first last. I'm sure it's kind of shifted.
It was the 30th when we recorded the last episode, so we have clicked over into a new month.
So it's 132 patrons right now. So thank you to all of our patrons.
Yeah, that is patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. Big thanks to our 132 patrons right now. That did tick down, but like we say, somebody's credit card expired, although the amount that's being contributed went up. So somebody boosted or was swapped out for a new person who boosted. So that's very nice. Very kind of you. Thank you very much.
Very kind. We appreciate it. Thank you. If you can't support us financially, support us in some way, and we will mention you here. Aaron sent another Canadian movie code to Rob to test out for him, which is really giving us work to do. So I don't know how much we should be thanking people. This was an interesting test. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so in Canada, renewing our movie codes is a little bit different in that we don't have movies anywhere. So there's no cross-pollination of once you've redeemed it on, say, Google Play, that it also shows up in your iTunes and Vudu and other places. We don't have that in Canada. So normally when you enter a code, you will get a selection screen of where would you like to redeem this movie. And you pick one, and that's the only place it's going to show up. So you do have to make that choice ahead of time. And we normally have 3 options, which is Apple iTunes, Google Play Store, and Cineplex, which is our big movie theater chain. Pretty much a monopoly in Canada, and they also have a home video service, the Cineplex movie store. Those are typically the 3. Occasionally, Microsoft will be in there, even though I think Microsoft shut down at movies and games thing that they used to do, but occasionally that'll be there too. But this movie that Aaron sent this previous week, the only option was Cineplex, which is really unusual. I have seen it be Google Play only. I have seen it be iTunes only, but this is the first time I came across one that was Cineplex only. I was like, that's fine. I have a Cineplex account. I can do that. Except when you go there, this movie does not exist in Cineplex's digital library. The code just says, sorry, error. And if you search for this movie in their library, it isn't there. So this is an interesting conundrum of it being the only service where you can redeem the code, but that movie not being in this service's library seems like a little bit of an oversight on someone's someone
you're the first person who's ever tried to redeem it and they didn't realize the link was broken.
Doesn't seem quite right. So yes, I'm gonna wait, test it again later. Maybe another service will show up as an option.
It's broken. You can't use it. We've tried.
We've tried.
You also sent me that link via text for somebody, and then I completely forgot about it.
I'm pretty sure that was Eddie who sent in a Movies Anywhere code, which can only be used.
I will try to remember to do it today. I'm very busy again today. I have a large list of chores to do before I have to cook dinner tonight.
But thank you, Aaron, and you're welcome, because I can confirm if you were going to try to use that code, you better have a Cineplex account, and even if you do, it doesn't work. So,
doesn't work.
Yeah, fantastic.
We also got no gratitude for keeping the podcast going through whatever's going on in the world right now, which is one of the reasons why I didn't watch anything this weekend. Because I have been obsessed, along with my sons, with the Kendrick Lamar and Drake rap beef that's been going on this weekend.
Yes.
It's all we've been talking about. It's just...
And I must say, like, other than I have a passing awareness, I've heard about this rap battle beef going back and forth and use of AI people, and there was like a lawsuit to get rid of one of the AI voices and stuff like that. But that's as much as I know. I know none of the details.
I am a middle-aged white man. I have no opinion on this matter at all that is of any validity whatsoever. I will just say that I was aware that things were, like Rob, I was aware that things were going on in the background.
Yeah.
I saw like videos popping up on some of my social media feeds that
Headline
were like
here or
talking
there.
about it, and I was like, okay, whatever. I guess that's a thing that's happening. People, I know that this happens in rap. I know that exists.
Okay,
you know, it's not something I have any. Couldn't tell you a single other beef that happened, even though I know that there have been.
There have definitely been, yes.
And they're like Tupac and a Biggie and stuff like that.
That's going back a ways at this point, but yes.
But I mean, that's literally the extent of the depth of my knowledge of these sorts of things. But it much like walking down the sidewalk and hearing two people yelling at each other and going, that's not really my business. I don't want to go. And then somebody says something that you're like, ooh, they shouldn't have said that. And then you turn, and next thing you know, you're like, I can't look away. And that's kind of what our whole weekend has been like. Like, I went to that derby party, and when I left, things were in a certain state. And when I got back, I was like, what has happened? New songs were out and stuff. It was nuts.
You are catching me unawares. I guess I'll have to go catch up after we finish recording this thing. Find out
I talked to my son about it
news.
Saturday morning, and he watched YouTube videos all day catching up.
Wow.
All day. And then he was explaining things to me. I'm like, I didn't get any of that. I was just, like I said, I just kind of got roped in as I walked by. I wasn't even paying attention. The next thing I know, I'm like, what is going on? Should I? Anyways, so instead of watching things on TV, I've been staring at my phone, looking at reaction videos, trying to figure out what's happening. Like some sort of
the most
teenager.
Reliable source of information that could possibly be reaction videos.
Reaction videos. What is this world coming to? I think they talked about it. Somebody said something about Rolling Stone weighed in on it and everything. I mean, it's like I think it's a
Why
deal.
not?
I don't know. Anyways, we got notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going, even though there was a big rap beef that was going on from Aaron, Mike, Casey, and Bill. That's the most important
thing going on in the background in the world at this time.
I know there is tons of other things. I will say this, and you will forgive me. I think you can all give yourself some grace. There are so many horrible things going on in the world at any given time that being able to focus on something that seems, I'm sure it's very big to them, but from my perspective on it, as far outside as you can possibly get, it's just distracting enough that I'm like, this seems like it's not very important to me, but it's distracting enough that it gets to kind of reset my brain so that I can go back to all the other horrible things that are going on in the world. Right. And then say,
Total whiplash is the name of the game these days.
It's like it's like just taking a breath of different types of air before going back in and trying to swim through the mire that is what's going on in the world. So Aaron, Mike, Casey, Bill, thank you for thanking us.
That's right. Those are the notes of gratitude, and we thank you for thanking us, Aaron, Mike, Casey, and Bill. The notes of gratitude and encouragement are appreciated for sure. So big thank you to you, and a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
And for all of the listeners out there, if any of you have heard this and goes, what is he talking about? Don't. Just you.
As far as the Drake Lamar thing? Okay.
Yes.
Don't go down the rabbit hole.
Just don't go down that rabbit hole because there's a lot. And it is.
Yes, I don't doubt that.
Apparently, and like I said, I don't know that much about rap, but apparently Kendrick Lamar is like known for the depth of his lyrics. Okay. So most of the reaction videos are just like, here's the surface level, here's the second level, here's the third level, here's the fourth level, here's the fifth level. I'm like, one of these levels has got to be made up. It feels very much like being in an English class and the teacher trying to tell you that what he really meant was. And I'm like, at some point, I don't know that he could have put all these things in there.
Very often writers aren't actively thinking that deeply as they're writing. It's pretty difficult. I mean, occasionally they are, but very often not.
And I mean, I think, but anyways, you will lose many hours of your life. In the news, other than the Kendrick Lamar thing, JVC announced two new 8K e-ShiftX D-iLA projectors. It's just too many freaking letters.
It is a whole lot of words and letters, but yes, they are e-ShiftX. This is the way of getting full 8K resolution onto your screen. D-iLA, their version for liquid crystal on silicon. This is JVC doing these. New projectors announced.
The flagship NZ, for Rob's sake, or NZ for everybody else in the world.
That's right.
900, also available as the RS4200, replaces the NZ9, which was the RS4100.
Right.
And the NZ800, which is the RS3200, replaces the NZ8, which is also the RS3100.
Yeah, I still don't know why they have the separate consumer and pro, where literally the only difference is the color of the ring of plastic around the lens, because there are no other differences. The price is the same. The performance is the same. They're even both black chassis. I don't know why JVC still does that.
Is there a, I'm sure it's just for SKU, so you SKUs.
Yeah.
But is there an RS232 port or something like that makes a difference, or is it all the same on the back?
No difference.
Okay,
They
well,
are
whatever.
literally identical except for the name. But the point being, NZ8 has become NZ800. NZ9 has become NZ900.
So
Yeah.
the outer looks remain identical, with the NZ900 still using the larger 100mm all glass lens, while the NZ800 uses the smaller 65mm all glass lens. Compared to the outgoing NZ9 and NZ8 models, the differences are evolutionary but significant. They are now using the third generation of JVC's native 4K resolution, and that's Cinema 4K, meaning 4096 by 2160, not 3840 by 2160.
Mm-hmm. Slightly
D-iLA.
wider, 17 by 9 instead of 16 by 9.
Yeah. D-iLA panels, and those have brought native panel contrast up to 100,000 to 1, with the NZ800. NZ8 was 80,000 to 1, and 150,000 to 1 for the NZ900, where the NZ9 was 100,000 to 1.
That's right. So a 25% increase for the NZ800 over the NZ8, and a 50% increase for the NZ900 over the NZ9.
An updated version of the blue Escient laser light engine also means increased lumen output at 2700 for the NZ800 and 3300 for the NZ900 versus 25 and 3000 for the outgoing models. Prices remain the same at $16,000 for the NZ800 and $26,000 frickin' dollars for the NZ900.
Yes.
Which brings us to perhaps the most exciting news in all of this. The price for an NZ8 drops to $12,000, and the NZ9, which is the outgoing models, drops to $21,000, which is crazy.
It's a lot of money.
Crazy.
Yes.
I'm not saying that they're not worth it and they're not good, but it's crazy to me that's the option now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you can get an OLED, which will still look better, by the way.
No, but
would get you up to 83.
Yes.
83.
But the 97-inch OLED, which is out there, 4K resolution, not 8K resolution, 97 inches, not as big as you can withstand before it gets too dim. That's going for $20,000 these days. So, it's right there at the same price as an NZ9 at this point, basically.
It's crazy. The NZ7 and NP5 remain in the lineup and unchanged at $9,000 and $6,000 respectively, although the NP5 is commonly found for $5,000 at most places that sell it. Still going to be my recommendation for now. It's just very hard to recommend these nearly 10,000 and way above projectors,
right?
Unless you're, when it's so cheap just to move your couch forward.
So one little thing that I did want to note, if we start at the bottom, the still going NP5, which uses a lamp, not lasers, and has native 4K, and that is Cinema 4K, 4096 horizontal, not 3840, but native 4K resolution panels, and the NP5 will just show you 4K resolution and can do so at up to 120 frames per second. So it is very, very capable for your gaming systems that you might be using these days. The NZ7 that remains in the lineup, it does what they're calling the 8K e-Shift, but not e-ShiftX. And so 8K e-Shift is what we've been used to from projectors before. We're used to like 1080p projectors that would show 4K resolution signals, but they would only wobble the panel twice per frame. So you aren't literally seeing 4 times the resolution. It's actually twice the resolution, but they're wobbling them sort of diagonally. That is what e-Shift is. So the NZ7, while it will accept an 8K 60 resolution signal, and it will show it to you at a resolution that's higher than 4K, it is shifting those pixels twice per frame. The e-ShiftX that the old NZ8 and the old NZ9 did have and has now been updated to a second generation of e-ShiftX in the NZ800 and NZ900, that is shifting the pixels 4 times per frame. So it is the entire 8K resolution. There really is an individual pixel for every single 8K resolution pixel showing up in that e-ShiftX. So it's actually refreshing its 4K native resolution panels at 240 hertz.
Jeez.
So it can definitely show you 4K 120, and it can show you 8K 60 by wobbling those panels 4 times per frame. So that's where the 8K resolution comes from, and that's why it's e-ShiftX versus regular e-Shift.
Still a lot of money. LG's smart TVs that run WebOS 4.0 or newer, meaning 2018 TV models or newer, are the first to get Apple's new Apple Music app for smart TVs that supports Dolby Atmos music playback. Previously, if you wanted to hear Dolby Atmos music from Apple Music, you had to use your phone, compatible earphones, and an Apple TV 4K, HomePod speakers, or a Sonos soundbar. But now LG TVs can be your Apple Music Dolby Atmos source. That's so easy to say.
I know.
The TV's built-in speakers can be used if it's a TV model that supports Dolby Atmos playback, or you can output via HDMI eARC to an AV receiver or soundbar. Not if you have a C2, like me, with an older receiver. You'll have
Should be able to.
Well, I know, but not with the older receiver. You'll have to activate a Dolby Atmos output from the TV app settings, but then you should be good to go. So there you go. So the receiver's the problem, not the TV.
Yeah, the sort of pleasant surprise in this is that it is going all the way back to the 2018 models, so that would have been like the C8, and then because LG thankfully just puts the number of the year at the end there, although 2020 was the X series, the 10 series, instead of just making it a 0. But yeah, I wasn't necessarily expecting this to go all the way back to 2018, so that's a little bit of a pleasant surprise. And they were saying that even on the TV models where the built-in TV speakers are not Dolby Atmos capable, they don't have the Dolby Atmos playback built into the TV, as long as it's running WebOS 4.0 or newer, you can still use the HDMI ARC output to send that to a Dolby Atmos soundbar or AV receiver and get it that way. So even on the TVs, dating back to 2018, that don't play back Dolby Atmos themselves through the built-in speakers, you can still do this from the Apple TV or Apple Music app that's built into those LG TVs. So just another way to get some Dolby Atmos music if you want it.
There you go. If there's one thing we're sure everyone can agree on, is that YouTube doesn't have enough ads, right?
Yeah.
I'm finding that every app and every service is just finding new and interesting ways to put ads on that. I didn't watch any more Fallout this week, unfortunately. But they are running ads at the beginning, but not in the middle of that. I am noticing that on other apps that you finish watching something and an ad will immediately pop up where there wasn't one before.
Yes. Yeah.
Lucky us, YouTube has been testing pause ads in select regions, primarily on smart TVs, and they said they've seen strong traction from this non-interruptive ad format. So while it hasn't been officially announced by Google themselves yet, get ready for ads to appear whenever you pause a YouTube video. I don't care about ads as long as they don't make noise. Like if it's
that is the thing, because very clearly we're often pausing a YouTube video because we need to talk to somebody, or the phone rang, or something like, or you just want to pay attention to something else, and you're pausing it more to turn the audio off than you are to actually hold your place in the video. So far, what the TV app ads where they've been testing this out, they have been like static image, no sound ads that you can just click on to dismiss or click into them if you want to. So that's maybe not the worst, but yeah.
If this keeps these services free or low cost, or keeps the costs down, I'm all for it. As long as it's...
I'm not all for it, but I am begrudgingly accept it. I get it.
Well, I mean, we can't... you can't assume that things are just always... you got to pay for something sometime, and not everything can be free constantly. At some point, so the people who make the content have to get paid, at the very least, and the services aren't really doing it anyway. So
yeah.
At least if they make a little bit more money, maybe they will. I don't know.
I don't think so.
I think that's
all
how
of
that
that money is going to Google and their investors. It is certainly not going to the YouTube creators, because that just keeps getting clawed back and back and back. But yeah, on this whole same tip, like I say, I can begrudgingly accept pause ads as long as they aren't making noise at me, and eventually they'll start doing that too. But to relate it back to the What We Watch section, because both of those movies that I watched, I did so on Amazon Prime, and I am not paying the extra $3 a month to make Amazon Prime Video ad-free. And so it was a little bit interesting to me because when I watched The Zone of Interest, they did a 1 minute before the movie began ad. And I'm like, that's acceptable. I'm not opposed to that. And then through that entire movie, there wasn't a single other ad. That movie played all the way through, and I'm like, okay, I'm fine with that. With The Beekeeper, there was a 90-second before the movie began ad, and then there were 3 other 1 minute ad breaks, which is the most ad breaks I've ever had in an Amazon Prime Video streaming experience. Before, I've really only had 1 mid-movie ad break. So I don't know whether that was pure random chance or whether they're just like some movies were willing to insert more ads than others, whether it's just a pure popularity thing. I'm not exactly sure what Amazon Prime is doing there, but it's creeping up. The number of ads I'm seeing on Amazon Prime Video is creeping up. And then the worst part of it was the ads they had to be at least 15 decibels louder than the movie. I mean, it was shockingly louder to the point where I was doing the classic old thing of like, oh crap, racing to get the remote and turn the volume down because I was a little bit scared for my system that I was playing at pretty darn full volume while I was watching those movies, because the movies themselves, they're actually streaming at what seems to be normal reference volume now, which is great. They weren't like wildly quieter or louder than disc playback. They were right about that level, and that all seemed good, but I had these turned up to pretty darn close to full reference volume, and then those ads came on, and they had to be at least 15 decibels louder. It was shockingly loud.
Comments. Dazz and his wife, Drea, have been doing a lot of painting in their house lately, so he wanted to weigh in with a few things they have learned. They started with in the basement home theater and went with Sherwin-Williams, like we always suggest. They went with the satin finish, which is one step down from regular eggshell. Repose gray was the shade. Sounds bleak, I guess. It's right next to casket. Is that the other one?
I don't know. I didn't pick the name.
Gravestone. Moonless night. I mean, what are the options here?
Yes. I don't know what slight tint towards some color that would be, because it's not in the family of completely neutral gray tones that we always talk about. I don't know which family that falls in. Maybe it's slightly brown.
Dre was about to paint a couple other areas in the house, but Daz decided to just clean the walls first. Turned out a little dish soap and elbow grease was all it took to save several $100s. In the living room, they have really high ceilings, so they decided to hire a professional painter to handle that. They wanted the same repose gray color. It's good. The House of Horrors. It's gonna be there's skulls everywhere. It's like, my house wasn't haunted before, and now it is. I wonder why. I am so sorry, Daz. Why did you pick this name? Like, what did you think I was going to do with it? I think he mustn't have known that there was no way that I got so hard baited on this one. It's not even funny. They wanted the same repose gray that they had used in the home theater, but the contractor only uses Behr paints, but not Sherwin-Williams. They were able to perfectly match the shade, though, and if you're buying Behr on your own, you can get it from Home Depot, where they will match any color. One tip is that having the color number or code works better than asking for a certain color by name. That is true. I've done that before. Be careful if you ask for it by name, because different brands have the same name, and that's not all the same shade.
Right.
That's what happened to me with the whites that we have in this house, which is called Swiss something. I don't Swiss coffee or something like that. I don't remember what it is, but I'll tell you what it's not. Haunted.
Right.
The contractor assured them that Behr's flat sheen was the way to go if they liked the Sherwin-Williams satin sheen they had used in the basement. They were apprehensive, but followed his advice, and so far their kits have not smudged the finish, not for lack of trying. So not all sheen finish names are equal across different brands, which is also true. The contractor also said that if they ever need to do any touch-ups, the bare flat finish blends more easily than other finishes. That is also true. I've experienced that myself. So they're glad they went with it in the end. In the bedroom, they went with bare and an eggshell enamel finish. In indirect light, it has sort of a velvet-like appearance, which they really like, but when any light hits it directly, it's quite glossy and reflective, much more so than Sherwin-Williams' eggshell finish. And going from Premium Plus to Dynasty in the product line also made a noticeable difference in the coverage, durability, and quality of the final finish, so it isn't pure marketing fluff, and listening to an expert is probably a good call. Yeah, when you don't know something about a product or a subject, it's often easy to assume, and maybe too easy to assume, that there's some sort of trickery going on where they're trying to fool you.
Especially when a paint brand has like 5 different lines of paint, all with the different names, and they get more and more and more expensive for the exact same amount, and it's like, are they really any different?
Yes, and there are some things in paint that, like a one-coat paint, okay? First of all, doesn't exist. I'm sorry. No. Does not exist. I don't care what they say. It's never one coat. I have never been able to do one coat.
Unless maybe you already have like a undamaged, clean wall and you're painting it the exact same color. Then you can probably get away with one coat.
Then you probably get away with one coat. It's always taken me more than one coat. No matter how good or how thick I try to lay it on or whatever, even the more expensive paints, it's never been one coat.
Yeah.
But other than that, a lot of the times with the paints, you really are getting something different, and you should listen. We think about home theater and we're like, oh, well, there's all kind of that stuff in home theater. Is there, though? There is, to a certain extent. You pay more for certain brands because of the name recognition, right? Sony costs more than maybe they should. Sonos, you're paying a lot for their ecosystem, and Apple's the same way, of course, their ecosystem, and you can recreate that, maybe not working as well together, for a lot less. But it's not like those products don't do what they say on the tin for the most part. And that's the same thing with paint and a lot of other stuff. Bikes are that way. Bikes, if the more money you spend on the bike, generally speaking, the better the bike will be. Yes, some brands will cost as a whole more overall, but if you're spending more on a bike, it's not like you're like, oh, I could have gotten the same bike for half the price. That's almost never the case. Bikes,
but I can certainly understand anybody making the assumption of like, okay, so I went from one brand of paint to another, and I had eggshell finish in my room before, so I'm going to get eggshell finish again, and then just being like, wait a second, this is definitely either flatter or more glossy than the other brand, and you can't just make that simple assumption because it's unfortunately we don't have some kind of industry-wide standard when it comes to paint finishes, and so it's great that the contractor that you hired was familiar enough to be like, oh, wait a second, if this is the color and the sheen that you liked and the durability level that you liked from this other brand, then here's the equivalent in the brand that I use, and having that knowledge is certainly valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Casey heard us wondering about a couple of things we saw in his photos last week, so we figured he'd write back to clarify. There's some pictures, so check that out. I know one of the things he's going to talk about is whatever the heck that is above his TV.
That's what it is, for sure. You wondered aloud, he wrote back.
The weird hole above his TV, that is indeed a basement window with some blackout curtains inside to completely block the light coming in. We were way off.
Oh, I guessed that.
Did you?
Yeah,
I thought we guessed that was a chimney.
Rough in for a chimney. That was another guess. Yeah, but
the wooden platform under his cylinder sub is actually just like a picture frame, not a full piece of wood. We guessed correctly that with the sub's isolation feet directly on the carpet, it sinks in too much with the downward-facing driver actually hits the carpet when it plays. You could actually hear it happening. So that necessitated the little wooden frame platform. As for his spreadsheet of potential new speakers, he heard us loud and clear, and we'll either go with the Ascend CMT 340 SE2 or the RBH Impression series. While he was intrigued by the Impression reference folded ribbon tweeters, getting 3 of those would push him above his speaker budget. So at this point, he's actually leaning towards the Ascends, as they'll cost a bit less than the Dome tweeter Impression series. I think you'll be fine. Whichever way you decide to go.
Yeah, between those two, I can't imagine. Like I say,
You're not going to be unhappy, that's for sure.
I mentioned last week, if you get them and you really don't like what you're hearing, something else is wrong. It's not the speakers.
Yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Bill just wanted to weigh in on his personal experience dealing with Monoprice warranty claim and exchange. He's heard some less than favorable tales, and even we have mentioned how it can be worth paying a little more to buy from a company like SVS if there are any concerns about customer service, returns, or repairs. And I have heard lots of horror stories. And I have not experienced them myself, but I have heard.
That's the thing, yeah.
And when I actually got a speaker in for a review, the one thing I did like about them, actually, is that I got a speaker in for a review. It didn't operate properly. Okay. And I didn't tell them I was going to mention in the review. I'm like, this is not operating properly. They're like, okay.
They weren't all stressed out about it. They didn't threaten to litigate you.
They didn't try to sue me out of existence. No, they're just like, whatever. And I just wrote the review, and they were like, whatever. That was the end of that. So, maybe they have a culture of,
They're kind of chill. All right.
He's happy to say, in his case, dealing with Monoprice was great. He bought some Monolith Encore speakers, and he really likes them, especially for the price. But the tweeter on one of his bookshelf speakers died suddenly, and he even opened it up himself to check that if maybe a wire had just come loose. He used their official RMA process, but since he was past the regular 30-day purchase window, they had discarded, and he had discarded the original boxes. This wasn't just a straightforward return. Furthermore, he confused things a little bit on his end by using a different email address than what had been entered for his original purchase. That is so frickin' me, dude. That is so me.
That's common, but he's like, that could be a wrinkle.
But a single Monoprice service rep stayed with him through the entire process, so he didn't have to keep explaining the situation to someone new. They quickly got both email addresses under one account, but then they went a step above and beyond. They know that the same speaker was on sale at the moment for a price that was lower than what he had originally paid, so they had him order a replacement at the sale price, then use that box to ship back his broken speaker, and they refunded his full original price, meaning he actually came out ahead on the price.
Yeah.
The entire process took less than 48 hours, and they were super pleasant throughout. So as far as he's concerned, he's happy to deal with Monoprice again anytime. So there you go. Okay, there's one positive and that we can point to.
It is, of course, one man's experience, but happy to hear that. Also,
every negative experience is one person's experience too.
That's right. So it is not out of the realm of possibility for companies to change. It very often goes the bad direction in that they start out really, really good and then get worse and worse. But it's not out of the realm of possibility for Monoprice to have improved, perhaps based upon receiving that negative feedback that they don't want that to become pervasive. So anyway, very, very happy that you're happy. That's always what we want to hear. I do, quite like those Monolith Encore series speakers for the price that they're charging. I think that's a nice option that's out there for someone who needs to not pay a crazy amount, but get some pretty darn decent speakers, pretty darn neutral, with nice dispersion. So yeah, great that you had that experience. We'll keep that in our anecdote back pocket.
All right, let's get some questions in here. Jay really appreciated our explanation about how we would configure his Golden Ear Triton Towers speakers so that have the self-powered bass drivers and an optional RCA subwoofer input, along with his pair of SVS PP3000 subwoofers. If we don't mind, he has a few last items he hopes we can clarify for him, since he has also looked up advice elsewhere, and that's left him with some remaining confusion. Right. Why are we not in favor of just running Odyssey Multi-Q XC32 with it set to 2 subwoofers instead of just 1 subwoofer again? Like, if he sets it to 2 subwoofers and just lets it do its thing, what's going to happen? What will go wrong? Yeah. Nothing will go wrong. I mean, it will not be. It will not be the way that we think that you should do it, and it's not the way that it would be. We think the best sounding. Okay. But what it will do is it will individually calibrate each subwoofer
as far as distance and trim level goes. It'll be an independent setting for distance and trim level for each of the 2 subs.
And generally speaking, that the subwoofers themselves are one individual bass producing. Like, together they are one bass producing unit. So rather than have it do that, you want to set the subwoofers so that they are both doing their thing, and level matched, and then let it adjust that level based on however the trim thing comes out, and then come out with one single delay that is for both subwoofers together.
So yeah, what's at issue here is our philosophy on the optimization of dual or 3 or 4 subwoofers is that our goal on AVRant is to get you the best uniformity. That's what we're really after. I mean, if you really don't care about uniformity, if you really only care about one seat and the other seats around you get whatever they get, then this really isn't going to matter to you. But if what you're going for is uniformity, then what's at issue here is the way that it's actually the sub EQ HT part of Multi-Q XT32. It's specifically the sub EQ HT part, which is doing the independent subwoofer things, 2 or 3 or 4 now, with the newest ones that have up to 4 subwoofer pre-outs. But what they do there is just the very same basic time alignment that they also do for the speakers, which is just microphone position number 1, wherever you position the microphone to begin with, that's where it sets all of the time alignment, all of the various distance settings is the way that it shows up in the AV receiver under the settings. And all it's doing is the first arrival of that sound wave, whenever that microphone first starts moving after the signal was sent, it just calculates that based on a static speed of sound that is locked inside of that AV receiver's processor and just says, okay, I know exactly when I electrically sent the signal. Here's how many milliseconds it took before the first movement of the microphone at position number 1. And based on the speed of sound, that's the distance from the microphone to the sub. And that's what gets set as the distance for all of your speakers and for your independent subwoofers. That works great for the speakers because at high frequencies, the time that it takes for a high frequency sound wave to get from the driver of the speaker to that microphone, it has gone up and down multiple times. You really can just get the direct sound that went in a straight line like a laser beam from the tweeter of the speaker to the microphone, and you can calculate that distance based on the speed of sound really, really accurately. It's pretty rare that you ever have to adjust the distances that were set for your speakers. But for your subwoofers, it's a completely different kettle of fish. Yeah. That very first air movement that reaches the microphone, our ears would never perceive that as a sound. The entire single up and down of the sine wave hasn't even formed yet. It takes bouncing around the room a couple of times before even a single one has formed, and then let alone it typically takes at least 2 or 3 cycles of a given note for our brain to actually perceive that the sound has happened. So when it comes to setting the distance for your subwoofers, we really need to take into account the standing wave pattern that'll get formed between one subwoofer and the room, and then 2 subwoofers and the room. And so people might be saying, okay, wait a second. If we do Rob's 12-step guide, or if I use the multi-sub optimizer software, I end up manually setting a different phase setting for subwoofer number 1 versus subwoofer number 2. I either do that with a fully variable phase knob on the subs themselves, or through something like a mini DSP 2x4 HD, where I add different delay settings for each subs. Why wouldn't I want to let sub EQ HT as part of Odyssey automatically do the same thing? Well, it's because what we're doing in that manual scenario is different than just raw time alignment to the first moment that the microphone moved based on where it was put in microphone position number 1. So you're going, okay, let's say I ran sub EQ HT. I told it I have 2 independent subs. It goes ahead and time aligns the speakers the way that it does. And then after that's happened, I manually go in there, I do Rob's 12-step guide, or I use multi-sub optimizer software, and I manually change the 2 different distance settings. Why can't I do that? Well, it's because when you ran Odyssey and you ran sub EQ HT, it first did those time-aligned distances, and then it equalized the subwoofer pre-outs. It applied EQ based on what it just did with that time alignment. If you now manually go back after that and change the relative distance settings, change the relative delays, the EQ is going to be wrong. You now have a different response at the microphone, especially across different seats, than you had when it just time aligned them first and then did the EQ. And there's no way to go back in and say, okay, well, EQ it again, but don't time align it again. It's going to fight with you back and forth.
Right.
So our approach is, we get that uniformity by manually adjusting the relative phase between our two subwoofers before we touch Odyssey at all, whether that's through the 12-step guide or through multi-sub optimizer. And then now that we have that uniformity, we need Odyssey to treat that as a single bass producing thing and not mess with what we've done for the uniformity. So that's why our approach is you tell Odyssey, I only have one subwoofer, but it is predicated on you having done the relative phases manually before you ever ran Odyssey, so you have that uniformity to begin with.
Yes. What Rob said.
Okay.
He found a comment from Sandy Gross, who designed his Golden Ear towers, that the crossover points between the built-in drivers are at 3,000 hertz between the folded ribbon tweeter and the two mid-range drivers, and then 90 hertz between the mid-range drivers and the three self-powered bass woofers. We said the bass woofers were still playing a lot higher than that, so does that maybe change any of our advice? I honestly don't remember what our advice was, other than to not use... to run
still
it like
set
you
them
normally
to small.
would.
Don't
but
run an
still set it
RCA
to small.
subwoofer pre-out to the towers. That was our
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah.
Does not change that advice one iota. No, those bass drivers, they are still playing definitely higher than 90 hertz. Yeah, I mean, it is correct. I had incorrectly assumed that the crossover point between the mid-range drivers and the self-powered bass woofers was at a higher frequency than that. But it doesn't change the fact that those bass drivers are still definitely playing above 90 hertz. As far as I'm aware, the slope on the upper end of those bass drivers isn't super duper steep. So there's still quite a bit of sound coming out above 90 hertz. And regardless, what we're still going for is, when it comes to adjusting the volume knob on the Golden Ear towers themselves, all we really care about there is getting the best blend from the mid-range drivers to the bass drivers, and then we don't consider those bass drivers as subwoofers. We're not sending them the subwoofer pre-out. So not a change at all to our advice.
Since he owns a pair of PB3000 subs now, he checked online with SVS for some advice, and he found their subwoofer recommendation tool not great. We love SVS.
By-wire cables is the two things we really don't like over there.
Yeah. He plugged in his Golden Ear speakers, and they looked at the price tag and gave a subwoofer recommendation. And it told him you should match them with SVS PB16 Ultra subs, and didn't suggest any other models. And cross them over to the speakers at 50 hertz. What? Yeah, don't. That tool is, unfortunately... and we have explained this before. We've talked about it before. Speaker manufacturers, subwoofer manufacturers, receiver manufacturers, AV gear manufacturers have to tread a line between what is true and what the customers think is true. Okay, so there's all kinds of ways they can do that. Can they be like, this is what's true, blue jeans cables. This is what's true. And suck it if you don't believe us. Okay? That's blue jeans cables. Yeah. Okay? And then there's whatever you say, we're just going to parrot it back to you and then make devices that reinforce those beliefs, because that'll make you buy our stuff. REL subwoofers. Okay?
Okay.
And then in between is SVS, where they're like, we're going to make good stuff. But we kind of have to acknowledge that you have some weird beliefs.
Yes.
We're gonna just acknowledge that they exist, and if you want to do stuff with them, that's fine. But we're not gonna really talk to you too much. So we'll put this little tool over in the corner. Their subwoofer recommendation tool literally is just a price comparison. It's like, if you spent this much, then you must be okay spending this out.
They do a little bit of output capability of the speakers.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So if you bought speakers that are this big, that can play this loud, you must have a room that's around this size. Therefore, you need
honestly,
this.
Room size is not coming into that subwoofer recommendation tool at all. They don't ask you about your room.
They don't ask you about it. That's why I'm saying they're inferring it from the size.
I don't even know if it's that.
Well, you can make the argument that it is. Okay, maybe I'm reading too many levels deep into this thing.
I think you're giving them too much credit. Yeah.
But the
as far as
reality
that
is
tool
it's
goes.
just to me, it's just a price comparison tool, really. It's just like you spent $3,000 on a single tower speaker, and then $6,000 for the pair.
How could you possibly spend less on your subwoofer?
Yes, your subwoofer should be about the same.
The other thing they're doing is the old, outdated notion that the ideal is that my speakers play as low as they possibly can. So they look up the specs and they're like, okay, these speakers claim that they play down to 32 hertz. We're going to add 10 to 15 hertz above that. And voila, there's your where you should set the crossover. That's old, outdated advice that is not taking into account the fact that my speakers, like I'm talking Rob here, the speakers that I own, they can play lower than 80 hertz. They absolutely can. You put them in an anechoic chamber, measure their output, and they can play lower than 80 hertz. But my center speaker, if I move across my 3-seater couch in my theater, it becomes louder in the left seat, right around 90 to 95 hertz, and it becomes quieter in my right seat, right around 90 to 95 hertz. So I end up setting like a 110 or 120 hertz crossover for my center speaker. Not because my speaker itself is physically incapable of playing lower than that, but because my room and the positioning of my center speaker and my seats in my room makes it so that it is non-uniform at a higher frequency. So if I cross them over to my uniform subwoofers that I set up very carefully, going back to the previous question, now I can get a really nice blend and uniformity across all my seats.
Yeah. He's good with setting all of his speakers to small. He's good with only outputting the subwoofer pre-out from his AV receiver to his subs. He's good with using an 80 hertz crossover, but is there any instance where he would not use 80 hertz and instead use a different crossover frequency? I wrote an article about this.
And I just mentioned my scenario, where it's exactly this case. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, yes, it's all room dependent, and or sometimes speaker dependent, but
sometimes
mostly
speaker dependent too. Yes.
Mostly room dependent. Like when you're in your room and you're realizing that you have some weirdness in your response at a certain frequency, it might be low, might be high. You're like, a lot of times it's higher than 80 hertz is what we're worried about. It's like
my center speaker.
Yes, like Rob's center speaker. So you may notice that you're having some, pretty bad fluctuations up there, and you're like, okay, well, that's it. I have to set it higher. So I have an article, case for crossover settings higher than 80 hertz. You can read that.
And it definitely might be. And it's not necessarily that one of my speakers, it works better if I set it higher than 80 hertz. Therefore, all of my speakers have to be set to higher than 80 hertz. That's not the case. You can do it individually, basically speaker by speaker. But I think then the flip side of the question is, do I ever set it lower than 80 hertz? And I mean, you could, but there isn't really a good incentive to do so, because really all you're asking is for whatever amplifiers are powering your speakers to use a whole lot more power now, because the lower you go in frequency, typically the greater power you're requiring from the amplifiers. So you're offloading that to the subwoofers. And
and I think that you're like, oh, well, my bass sounds really clean down to 50 hertz, and my speakers play down this 50 hertz, so I'm going to lower the crossover for just my front speakers to 50 hertz. What you've now done is taken the bass that was pretty even before, coming from your subwoofers and the properly placed subwoofers, and now putting it into two speakers that are not the same location, and assuming you're still going to get even bass. You might. You can test it and figure it out.
My front left speaker, for whatever reason, because of the exact shape of my room and where my seats are, I can play my front left speaker and I can listen to all three of my seats across my couch and get pretty darn uniform response down to about 65 hertz with that one speaker in my system. But I don't then set my crossover from my front left speaker to 70 hertz just because that works. It's like there isn't really an incentive to set it lower than 80, but you can definitely find reasons to set it higher than 80 sometimes.
Yeah. His receiver also has an LPF or LFE setting. He's come across conflicting advice about how to set that. What should it be set to? I have an article about that one too.
Okay.
It's 120 or whatever it says. But
it's usually 120 hertz, which is the default, and that setting shouldn't exist, and we don't really know why it does anymore, and we wish that it didn't, and you should never ever change it. The low frequency effects, that's the LFE, the low frequency effects channel is its own separate dedicated channel. It You can have a soundtrack that has 0 sounds in the low frequency effects channel and it will still have bass in all the other channels, or you can have sounds that only exist in the low frequency effects channels and play out of no other speakers in the system, only the dedicated subwoofer. That channel goes from 20 hertz to 200 hertz, and it is supposed to have an industry-wide standard defined roll-off that begins on the upper end at 120 hertz. Yes. And that's just what it is. And why you would ever change that has never made any sense to me, because the big problem is if you do ever change that low pass filter, that's what the LPF for LFE stands for, low pass filter for the low frequency effects channel. If you change that to, let's say, 80 hertz, because there is the weird advice out there where people are like, it should all match, right? Every crossover frequency and the LPF for LFE should all match. So let's say you go and set that LPF for LFE to 80 hertz. The sound that now gets rolled off in the low frequency effects dedicated channel above 80 hertz, it does not get rerouted anywhere. Unlike the bass management for your speakers, where if I change the crossover for my center speaker to 120 hertz, now the bass below 120 hertz in the center channel gets rerouted to my subwoofers. I still hear that sound. But if I lower the low pass filter for the dedicated low frequency effects channel, the sound above that where I've manually set it now, it does not get rerouted anywhere. It doesn't go to your speakers. It's just gone, or at the very least, quieter than it was ever supposed to be. So I don't know why that setting is still there. I mean, I know it's because it goes back to the days we only had a single subwoofer. Some people found experimentally that if they rolled off the top end of their subwoofer a little bit lower, that it reduced some standing wave in their room that was really problematic. And that just became like, never take that setting away from me, because I got my system to sound less boomy because of that setting. And now they can never remove it, even though they should.
They should. There's no reason for it to be there. Chris got himself a couple of new displays. First up, he got a new 55-inch Hisense U7K for his TV room. He's using it with a Denon X3400 receiver. He uses the TV's built-in apps and likes the convenience of just using one remote. Mm-hmm. So he does have HDMI-CEC and HDMI ARC both turned on. When he had his previous TV, a Sharp with Roku built in, he could use the TV's remote, and the AV receiver would power on and off along with the TV. With this new Hisense connected, the Denon will turn on with the TV, and he can control the Denon's volume just fine. The Denon does not turn off when he turns off the TV.
Yeah.
He's pretty sure he has every HDMI control option turned on in his Denon's receiver setting. Is there something he could have missed?
Yes, potentially.
The HDMI-CEC? Yes.
Yeah, you could have. So on the Denon side, first of all, because that is the one that gives you several different granular controls within what they call HDMI-CEC HDMI control. You won't see CEC in the settings menu. You will see it called HDMI control, which at least isn't a wildly, different name that you couldn't possibly guess what that is, but it is not CEC in the labels. It's HDMI control. Naturally, you have to have that turned on, the entire setting, and then ARC, the audio return channel, also turned on for what you want to do. By default, the TV audio switching is turned on, which just means every time you do power on the TV via CEC, HDMI control, it will set the Denon to the ARC input automatically, and it seems like that's what you want to do. But then there is a separate power off control setting within the HDMI control on the Denon. By default, that is set to all. And you could try setting it to video instead of all, because the only other option is off, and that isn't what we want. You do want the AV receiver to power on and off along with your TV. So it's either going to be the all or the video setting. Video just means it only powers off if the video signal goes away, separate from the audio signal. By default, it's all. So if the audio or the video signal goes away from the TV, then the AV receiver is supposed to power off. You probably have that set correctly. It'd be a little unlikely that you somehow turned power off control to off, because that would seem pretty clear that that's not the correct setting. So I think what you might have overlooked is actually in your new Hisense TV, because it also has settings. So on that one, if you go to you press the cog wheel on the button on the remote, go to the settings, you go to the channels and inputs section. Not exactly the most intuitive, but that's where this is hiding. You go to the inputs part of the channels and inputs, and then they actually label theirs HDMI and CEC, the device auto power off section that you can set in there. And on that one, you'd want to make sure that that is set to on, and it is not on by default. The device auto power off. You need to set that to on so that the TV sends a signal to the AV receiver, hey, power off when I power off. So I believe that's the most likely candidate for the setting that got missed, because it's the only one that by default wouldn't be correct, and it is kind of tucked away in a place you might not think to look inside the high senses user menu.
Second, he got a 27-inch LG Ultra Gear OLED computer monitor for his bedroom. That's a much easier thing to say. I don't understand why they don't make more things that way.
Yeah.
It has a 1440p resolution. He plugged it into his X1300W receiver into his HDMI port with the Apple TV 4K plugged into the Denon. On his old monitor, the Denon would show its on-screen display so that he could see its volume level when he changed it. But now that on-screen display won't show up anymore. Is that due to the 1440p resolution, or is there some other setting he could change in his Denon to get the on-screen display back? I mean, the on-screen display, you have to have video processing turned on, and I have experienced on mine that if the bit rate is too high, or if there's if you're at the maximum level of what the HDMI ports or whatever processing within your receiver hits its limit, the on-screen display goes away even if you have it turned on. So that would be my guess.
As far as I'm aware, you've basically hit on it. That as far as I'm aware, going back to the X1300W, its on-screen display only worked at 1080p resolution. It wouldn't show it if you were putting through 4K. It wouldn't show it if you were putting through HDR. It only worked at 1080p SDR, and then that on-screen display disappeared at anything higher than that signal level. So setting it to 1440p, which is the native resolution of your new monitor, and the Apple TV 4K will set itself to output 1440p. Your 27-inch Ultra Gear is also HDR compatible, so that might be going on too. And as far as I'm aware, the Denon X1300W, going back there, if it was higher than 1080p standard dynamic range, that on-screen display was going to disappear. So I suppose you could lock your Apple TV 4K's output to 1080p standard dynamic range max and never let it change to HDR or a higher resolution than that. That should allow you to get your on-screen display from your Denon back. And honestly, the difference in letting the monitor upscale from 1080p to 1440p versus native 1440p output from the Apple TV 4K, which means the Apple is doing scaling itself, because it's not as though your native streaming video source was coming in at 1440p. Yeah. So you're just shifting where the scaling is happening. So that's not an unacceptable thing to do. Limit the resolution output of your Apple TV 4K, and your on-screen display will probably show back up.
Lior is using an Epson TW9400 projector that's the same as 6050 UB in North America, along with a Denon X4400H receiver. He only uses one source device, and that's the NVIDIA Shield. The Shield plugged into the Denon SDR signals pass through and show up on the projector immediately, but 4K 60 HDR 10 signals create a long, sometimes troublesome handshake. The screen will be blank for at least 6 or 7 seconds at a time. Or I guess every time. And it's an annoyance, especially if he's watching shorter videos and the format is changing back and forth in between, or if he's watching something with ads and those interrupt the HDR10 signal. He's tried plugging his NVIDIA Shield directly into his Epson, and the HDR10 image appeared almost instantly that way, so it seems to be the result of having the Denon receiver in between. But sadly, the TW9400 does not have eARC, and he isn't willing to downgrade his audio signals, so that's not a solution. He was wondering if he could plug his NVIDIA Shield into an HDMI splitter that would separate the video from the audio and allow him to plug only the video signal straight into the projector through the splitter and only the audio into this receiver. He found our recommendation from a few months ago for the Ori HDA 927 device, which offers HDMI video pass-through output and a separate dedicated HDMI audio output. It seems like that's what he's looking for. And at only $50, he'd be happy to give it a try. But it has been out of stock and available for a couple of months now, with no indication of if or when it's coming back. He knows HD Fury Arcana might be the solution, but it's $250, and that's before shipping it overseas. Is there an alternative to the Ori, blah, 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 I'm not going to say it again, that is closer to the price point instead of the HD Furies? There is no guarantee that any of this is going to work. Let's just the HD Fury, I would say, has the best chance of working,
because it locks the EDID.
Once if there's going to be a renegotiation of the handshake, which there is always, and maybe it's very fast going directly into the projector. The
Sounds
minute you
like
put a device in between there, you don't know if it's going to be, if you're ever going to get rid of that 6 or 7 second delay. It's a tough.
Yeah, because it could be tough. Like if the source device, and Video Shield in your case, is now getting EDID information from both the AV receiver and the projector, getting them separately now through separated HDMI ports instead of as a daisy chain link, through the Denon receiver first and then into the Epson projector. But if it is still receiving both EDID signals, there still might be a delay, even when you're using a splitter in between. So this is one where I absolutely, because I don't have the first-hand experience to guarantee that either of the devices I'm going to mention is going to work whatsoever. In terms of something that's kind of close to that $50 price point, Sewell does have their Echo Split. This is a single HDMI input and 2 HDMI outputs. The HDMI output number 2 has scaling on it. So the whole idea of this was I'm connecting a 4K resolution source to both a 4K resolution display and a 1080p display, and it will automatically separate and scale down to 1080p so that you don't have to send 1080p to both of those displays. It'll pass the 4K through to display number 1, but scale down to 1080p for display number 2. There is no reason that doesn't work for an AV receiver as well, scale down the signal, but it is not an HDR switcher. So like if you've got one HDR display and one SDR display, it is not going to somehow, down or convert the HDR to SDR for your SDR display. If you have a much older AV receiver, not in your case, but for anyone else who might be listening, if you have a much older AV receiver that doesn't handle HDR or Dolby Vision or something like that, it's not going to do that conversion for you. Basically for this purpose, for just trying to separate out the audio, some people have it working pretty well and some people don't. And I can absolutely see the scenarios why, because if the capabilities, again, the source device is still getting 2 separate EDIDs, one from your AV receiver, one from your TV, so there could still be conflicts there. The device that has a much better chance of working is the reason why the Array 927 isn't around anymore, and it's because they replaced it with the 929. The thing is, the 929 costs more. It's $100. The 927 was down to $50 because it was being gotten rid of, and now the 929 is in there replacing it for $100. This one has a better chance of working because, again, it's a single HDMI input, but then they actually have 3 different HDMI outputs. One is a strict video pass-through that goes right to your TV, does not touch the video signal at all, and then they have a dedicated audio-only, no video whatsoever, audio-only HDMI output meant to go right to an AV receiver. So that's the one that in all likelihood would work. It's more than $50, but it's less than $250, so you might be willing to give that one a try. The Array 929 is the one to go for now.
Mm-hmm. Very exciting.
Yeah.
I have to scroll down because I was doing something else. Okay, I guess we're on Steve now?
We are.
Yeah, okay. Steve says his wife asked him, can we be like normal people? Or can't we be like normal people? No. Which means no more sound system in their family room. She just wants a TV with a sound bar. Steve?
Yeah.
Get the crappiest sound bar you can possibly find.
That's not hard.
Steve, I want you to go to Sam's. I want you to find the cheapest garbage sound bar or Walmart or whatever that you can find and say, is this what you want? Yeah. Oh, look at the price. It's only $43.29 because that's a normal price things are when they're not trying to blow them out because they're absolute garbage. Yeah, is this what you want? Yeah. Will that sound good? I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert in sound bars, and you said you just wanted something normal. This is a normal store with normal products. Would you like me to buy this? Yeah. So why does it sound so bad? What do you mean? It sounds normal to me. This is what normal sounds like.
Right.
Do not buy a good one, Steve. Steve, do not buy a good sound bar. Or if you do get one of those dragon ones that cost like $2,500.
Right. Yes.
That doesn't sound that good anyways, but that sounds better than the $43.29 one. Blah, 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 blah. He isn't going to complain because he does get to have an entire separate room dedicated to just being a home theater now. He already had a sound set up in there, but it was basically just for gaming on his PS5. So now he has 2 speaker systems that he can consolidate and combine into a single larger home theater setup to be used for both gaming and movie watching. He figures he'll max out his receiver's capabilities with 7.2 configuration, and that's where the question comes in. He was using a single Klipsch reference R120 SW 12-inch ported sub in the family room before, has specified -3 dB point of 29 hertz, which is so very impressive. And by all accounts, that's fairly accurate. In his gaming room, he was using a single Infinity Interlude 100S 10-inch ported sub. It was spec'd down to -3 dB at 32 hertz. Again, by all accounts, pretty accurate specification. So can he use those 2 subwoofers together now that his gaming room has become a dedicated home theater? Are they close enough that even though they are different brands and one is 12 and the other is 10-inch, if it's okay to do so, he would rather use what he already has and avoid spending extra money at the moment. But think of all the money you're going to save on not buying a good soundbar and put it towards a couple of good subwoofers. But if the only way to get good results is to buy something, would it make sense to get a second Klipsch? I wouldn't get a second Klipsch, like in any world.
Sort of the real deciding factor for me is that I wouldn't spend the money on getting a second.
That's putting
Klipsch.
good money after bad. I mean, bad money after good, or good money after bad. I don't know what you would call that. It's not that it's the bad sub. It's okay. It's fine. I mean, I think it's fine. Whatever.
Oh, you're gonna get some chest thumps and some kicks and some rumbles.
There is bass. There is bass coming from that device, and I have no problems with you having that. But buying more of fine feels like getting the cheapest thing on the menu at the Olive Garden. You're just like, do I really want more of this? Or was I so hungry that I didn't care, and now that I know how good food could be, I would rather have good food and save up for it? That's kind of where I stand here.
Yeah. So
use what you have. Yes, I think
absolutely. Yeah, and I'm not worried in this scenario about using those 2 subwoofers together. It's not going to be so drastically, different between the 2 of them in their performance that it's really going to be all that noticeable. And you definitely can get benefits from running those 2 subwoofers together, because the majority of bass is not below 30 hertz. The majority of bass that we're hearing and really care about in movies and definitely in music is 40 hertz and above, and both of your subs can output that. So yeah, I would feel fine using those 2 subwoofers in the room together. I definitely wouldn't go spending money on a second Klipsch. If you were to spend money, I would spend considerably more money to get 2 completely new subwoofers. And I mean, look, if you want to keep the price kind of reasonable, something like RSL's Speedwoofer 10S, like a pair of those, will definitely outperform, even though it's 10 inches versus the Klipsch that was 12 inches, right? But 2 of the RSL Speedwoofer 10S's will definitely outperform both of the subwoofers you have and work really well together. But that's clearly more than getting a single Klipsch R120SW. So it's that type of upgrade I would go for. We also, at this moment, don't know the exact scenario of your gaming room. It sounds like this is a spare bedroom, so it probably has a door, but that's completely an assumption on my part. Maybe it's
you're making a lot of assumptions on this thing.
Maybe it's a den space with just an opening and it doesn't have a door that you could close. In which case, something like a pair of RSL Speedwoofer 10S's might not be able to get you to full reference volume right down at 20 hertz, like that. We have to consider what the room is scenario is, but you're not really at the point of making that purchase decision yet. So as far as could you just take that 12-inch Klipsch that you have, use it with the 10-inch Infinity that you have, are they going to be so wildly different that it's going to be a problem? No. Go ahead, use them together, and don't spend like $300 on a sub right now. That would be worth it.
If we were to be just deathly honest about this, the subwoofer sort of debate of matching 2 unlike subs. Even if you were to buy an SVS that was the proper size, or Shure or something, or RSL, and put it in this room, we would say, it's almost not worth it to try to made it with this Klipsch. But the reality is, for the most part, it's probably, it's probably not that bad. It's just not. The problem we're gonna have from our perspective is you're gonna come back and say, I put these 2 subs in the same room together, and I'm still having problems with the evenness of the bass, and we're going, it's a Klipsch. It's a clip. The clip's just a problem here.
If you had upgraded and gotten a single monolith or SVS or RSL 12S or something like that.
And then
really
you matched them. It
different.
was like, it's not keeping up. It's not as linear. It doesn't play as low. There's all sorts of other issues. Yeah. So for us, we're like, just unplug everything else and throw it away or sell it or do whatever you're going to do with it and have the one sub that's capable and not. But if it were my house, I would probably plug them both in and just realize that any bass inconsistency I hear is because I got this not great sub. So, but I don't want to have to deal with you complaining to me about it, because that's what you're going to do. And fair enough. You're like, well, we told you it'd be okay and it might be a little bit better. And you're like, but you didn't hear the little bit part. You heard better. And that's the end of it. It's kind of like, you're going to the mechanic and they'll say they're going to fix your brakes and you're like, but there's still rust.
Sure.
What? Yeah, you said you're going to fix my brakes, but there's rust on the car. Okay, listen, I don't know.
But to be clear, with what you have on hand right now, we do think beneficial.
Yes.
Go ahead, no problem. But don't buy anything now. Wait until you've saved up enough to buy the really good thing.
The good thing, the proper thing. It doesn't have to be, with just get away from the whole headroom idea and just get the right size thing for your space. Tyler has an Epson 5050 UB projector, and he recently got the new Sofa Baton X1S universal remote. When he programmed the remote, he set the Epson to always be on, so the only way it will turn off is by manually pressing the power button. Being a lamp-based projector, he didn't want any chance of the projector powering off just because he changed activities on the remote.
Yeah.
But he's having a problem. A weird problem, he says. When he switches activities to use his Panasonic UB420 Ultra HD Blu-ray player, the projector powers itself down. And sometimes when he's in the middle of watching a disc, the projector will just randomly shut itself off. The projector will just randomly shut itself off. The projector's original remote is far away. It's like in Cambodia or something.
Right.
He shipped it to Antarctica.
You could just take the batteries out. That'll be the even more sure way. But regardless.
And nothing besides the power button on the Sofa Baton controls the projectors on or off command. So it definitely isn't an accidental button push. What could be messing things up like this? Any suggestions? Well, Rob has already kind of hinted at it, but far away does not mean necessarily in a drawer. I mean, it could be.
But I don't think this is a remote button being pushed. I have a pretty solid guess what's going on here.
Yeah, I will say that if the remote is still like in the room, visible, where it's pointed at a certain direction, I think that this is something to go with CEC or something along those lines.
This is CEC. This is almost certainly CEC.
Let's just put this out there.
Yeah.
It is possible that your remote, if the battery is dying, can send out erroneous signals. It does that. That has been known to happen. It could be that. It's almost certainly CEC.
Yeah,
but that's I'm just saying the most unlikely thing is ghosts. Maybe you painted your room the Repros gray. There's the poltergeist angle.
That's what
the remote just randomly sending out things because of a failing battery. But let's just be honest and blame HDMI for everything because it's usually the problem.
Well, yeah. I mean, the fact that he has activities suggests he has other sources besides his Panasonic Ultra HD Blu-ray player. He mentioned, he specifically said, my projector, it's just on all the time as far as the Sofa Baton is considered. I have to manually press the power button for the projector to turn off my projector. But there are power buttons for your other source devices. And when your other source device, let's say you were using your cable box, I don't know if you have one, but if you did, let's say you were using a streaming box, I don't know if you have one, but let's say you do, you're using either of those and you switch activities from using the cable box or from using the streaming box to using your Panasonic player, and it goes ahead and sends a power command to the cable box or to the streaming box. Hey, I'm not using you anymore. Go ahead and power down. Which, if HDMI-CEC is on in anything, like even if you were careful, like I turned CEC off in my Epson projector. That's all I need to do, right? I'm not using CEC for my Epson projector, so I turned off Epson HDMI control. really doesn't matter. If HDMI-CEC is on for any device anywhere in the signal chain, not even the device you're using at the moment, it's still going to send those CEC commands and they're still going to get through. And so when, like he said, every time he changes the activity from one activity to the Panasonic player, his projector turns off, you almost certainly have one of your source devices still has HDMI-CEC turned on. And so when the command for the activity says, hey, I'm not using that source anymore, turn off, that signal gets sent through and turns off the Epson projector. Yeah. So that's almost certainly what's going on. Now, why is it sometimes working? I'm going ahead, I'm using my Panasonic Blu-ray player, everything's working, and then in the middle of the movie, the Epson projector powers itself off. It's because your cable box or your streaming box just went to sleep.
That's right.
That's what happened. It just went to sleep in the background. You weren't using it, so you didn't notice, but it sent out its stupid HDMI-CEC command to power everything off, and your Epson responded. So you have to make sure you meticulously go through every single device in your system and turn CEC off for all of them. And you have a sofa baton. There's no reason you need to use CEC anymore. There's zero reason that you need to use it anymore. And we know you're not using like your display's built-in apps and that you need HDMI audio return channel because you're using an Epson projector. So that's not got built-in apps. So we know you don't need CEC to be on for audio return channel purposes.
And you may have it on accidentally. You may not just not.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah. You know, I mean.
Or you might have had a power outage, and when you plugged your Apple TV 4K back into power, it turns CEC back on. Like that stuff happens. That crap happens all the time. So yeah, you have to be kind of meticulous about it. But this is for sure CEC causing this problem for you.
HDMI is great. Single cable solution, guys.
Simple, couldn't be easier. Plug and play.
It's consumer friendly. You plug it in, and now everything works off of one remote.
Yeah.
Any remote. Pick up any remote. If it's got the button on it that you need, it'll control everything you want it to control.
Seamless.
Seamless integration.
Yeah. Who needs installers? Who needs Harmony remotes? Who could possibly need a Harmony remote anymore?
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on. Chris says he first started getting into home theater 20 years ago. He got a hold of a cheap set of Klipsch speakers, and little by little he upgraded over the years, but he always stuck with Klipsch. He went higher in their product line, but he's never owned a different brand. He feels like the time has finally come to venture out a little. He'd like to bring a couple of different brands of speakers into his house to directly compare them to his current 5.2.4 Klipsch setup. That's an interesting question that I don't think we've ever we've repeated ourselves a lot on this podcast. Mm-hmm. We've never had this question. This is a unique question. So he keeps hearing about how Klipsch speakers have a characteristic sound and how there are more neutral speakers out there. So he wants to hear and compare that for himself, not just in-store demos. Mm-hmm. If he decided he wants to replace the Klipsch speakers, he won't go beyond the 5 floor level. He's happy with his current pair of subs, and his 4 overhead speakers for Atmos seem perfectly fine to him.
Yeah.
Which he says now before he hears better speakers, but whatever.
Yeah, but whatever.
So when it comes to bringing in some speakers to compare, is bringing in just a pair of front, left, and right speakers sufficient? Should you get a full front 3 set with center speaker as well? Is it actually necessary to bring in the full 5 speaker set to see if that's what you might end up replacing? In other words, how far does he have to go in order to have a fair comparison? Mm-hmm. Front 2 is fine.
Yeah, I'd get a pair. I'd get a pair.
Every sense, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we're going to dig into a little bit more, but in terms of that question directly, I'm perfectly happy making a comparison between a couple, 3 different brands and models of speakers that I'm considering. Just going with a pair. So yeah, we're going to dig into more of it. So that answers that part.
Okay. How exactly? I've already gotten a link up for it. How exactly does he conduct a fair comparison? Does he rerun his room correction for each of the speakers? In his case, does he not? He does not have 2 speaker preset memory slots that will allow him to switch between 2 different configurations fairly quickly. So does it honestly make sense to listen to his current setup for a while, then change speakers, run his room correction, and listen to that new setup, then have to do all that again to switch back? So we don't know what size speakers he has. Is that true?
I don't know at the moment. No.
Yeah. So you can look at my most recent review of the SVS Evolution bookshelf
Ultra
speakers.
Evolution?
Yeah.
Okay.
and see how I did it.
Okay.
Because that's how I'm going to recommend you do it, which is basically I switched off all of my room correction because we're really trying to hear the differences between the two speakers. And if the room's making an effect, in theory, it makes the same effect for both. So I don't know.
Right.
Hopefully you've put up, I've got room treatments all over my space, so I feel more confident that my room is not having as great an effect, but maybe your room is highly reflective. I don't know. But, whenever you're buying speakers, whatever you're doing, you should always treat the room first, get the room as good as you can before you start to buy speakers. I'm going to assume that you've done that. You can look at mine, and what I basically did was turned off all the room corrections, set up a SPL meter, and just ran pink noise through both the sets of speakers to get a sense of, like, at a volume level, I picked, I think, minus 10 on my dial. A volume level, how different are they? Like, what's the difference in their output?
The difference in output between, and a little bit of clarification here. This might be a little bit disruptive to your system.
Not a little, but go on.
If you have a AV receiver that's capable of processing 5.2.4, I have zero doubt that it's capable of either setting up a self-powered zone 2, and it'll probably steal the height 2 binding post to do that or something along those lines, or that it will or that it will have the ability to set up speakers A and speakers B. And again, it'll steal some pair of binding posts, maybe the surround backs or something can be repurposed as speakers B. But that is a change to the configuration of your current system, either both wiring or just settings. But it is a bit of a disruption. But that's sort of the mechanics of how am I going to be able to quickly switch between one pair of speakers and be listening to those, and then while that same content is still playing, switch to the other pair of speakers. And you can do it either through speakers A and speakers B, or through main zone and zone 2. It isn't necessarily going to be completely instantaneous, but it's going to be a whole lot faster than physically rewiring speakers in between or running room correction in between. So
and this will give you
make use of.
What I'm doing is giving you an idea of what the different volume levels have to be in order for you to have them level matched. And then you're just going to switch between the two speakers however you do it. You could have it done physically too. I mean, in my opinion, any speaker differences that are so slight that you have to like A/B it really, really super closely, those are the same speakers. You know what I mean? I mean, they're close enough. I mean, we're not going... What you're going for in this instance is... I'm looking for something that sounds drastically different than my current speakers. So if it doesn't sound drastically different than my current speakers, I don't need it, right?
Why would I replace my current speakers when it's like such a small difference? I have to really squint and make myself believe that I heard the difference. No, it's going to be a much more readily apparent difference in that. And I do think it is possible in the scenario that you've described to us that you will find speakers that sound very obviously different from the ones that you already own.
Will you think they're better? Okay. I don't know. So when you're switching between two speakers and you're doing it quickly, or even not all that quickly, but when you're switching between two speakers and you hear a difference, often when the difference happens, you're like, ugh, that sounds different. I don't like it as much. Or that sounds different. I really like it. But either way, you'll be biased in one way or another. So what you want to kind of do is switch between them and say, this one sounds like this and this one sounds like that. Okay. And get like an idea of in your head of what the different, or write it down on a piece of paper, of what the differences are. And then you go back afterwards and say, okay, now that I've done this quick test, because that should, honestly, dude, if it takes you a real long time, you're doing it wrong. The differences are too subtle. Like they need to be major in this case. I mean, major enough that you're noticing them pretty quickly.
Yeah, because you're thinking about spending a good chunk of change potentially. That's right. Here.
So when you do that afterwards, so you've turned off, if you've got bookshelf speakers, you've turned off the room correction, you've done the level matching, you've then left your speakers on small and turned off the subwoofers. The subwoofers are no longer engaged as well.
This is a unintuitive and important factor that Tom is describing here. So pay some attention to this.
When you've done all this, you're just listening to the speakers and you're like, well, what about the bass? Who gives a crap? You're not listening to the bass.
We know already. Yeah.
You've already got subwoofers that you're happy with. Okay. Whether or not I would be happy with them remains to be seen. But you're happy with them. So you take them out of the equation, so you're just listening to the speakers. If one speaker plays 10 decibels lower, or 10 not 10 decibels, 10 hertz lower than the other ones, suddenly that one's got a bunch more bass, but you're never going to hear it because you're always going to have your speakers crossed over anyways.
Or you're not going to hear that difference. Yeah, this is really, really critical, because even if you are aware, you tested the speakers separately, and you're like, I know this, speakers A that I'm testing, I know that they can play lower and louder than speakers B. And so I know that ahead of time, so I'm not going to let that affect my decision. It's impossible. You can't do it. There's no human on earth who can, even knowing ahead of time, stop themselves from evaluating the entire rest of the frequency range with the masking effect or just the impact that the bass coming out of that speaker, if it's different between the two speakers, it masks and changes your opinion of speakers so much, the bass. So it's really important that you still have the speakers, both set of speakers, set to small with a crossover engaged. I actually, when I'm comparing speakers, I often raise that crossover frequency considerably higher than 80 hertz. I'll raise it up to 150 or 200 if my AV receiver lets me do that. I'll raise it considerably higher to really make sure a lot of that bass is rolled off, because it is remarkable how many times, if you listen to those speakers playing full range and you compare them and you're like, okay, I think I hear whatever differences I think that I hear, and then you roll off the bass evenly on both sets of speakers, the differences that are there in the mid-range and treble become quite a bit more apparent. Like I've had that experience many, many times. So have that set to small, the crossover still engaged, but then you turn the power off of the subwoofers, so you're only hearing the lower mid-range to the upper treble of the speakers under comparison.
And they should sound different. In these cases, what you're going for.
Yeah.
They should sound different, okay? And then you take some notes of how different they sound. Then, to me, the next thing you do is you set up each set of speakers, and this will be in subsequent days or whatever, and then run your room correction, do all your stuff that you would normally do with the new set of speakers. You've already lived with your other ones.
Yeah.
Set them up with your new set of speakers that you're testing out for a little while, and you can do stereo music or whatever. You may have to disengage your center channel because it may be a timbre mismatch to the
You just say, I have no center, so it'd get phantom center now.
So that you can get sort of an idea of what it sounds like in a more surround environment. But, you could just listen to music for a little while with those, with the room correction on, so you get sort of that out of the way.
Yeah.
And the subwoofers and everything else. And you kind of live with it for a little bit, because these drastic differences can really play with your mind. And you may find at first that you're like, every time I switch, I don't like what I've switched to, even though I'm switching between two things. And like, I should prefer one, but every time I switch, I don't like the switch. This sounds too trebly. Next one, this one doesn't sound trebly enough.
Right.
You're like, what? It's like, as you've gotten used to one, the next one sounds bad. So now that you've done that, now that you've done those quick switches, set up the speakers that you have in for test and see how they sound to you over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
You may find that you're like, at the end, you're like, I don't know. I don't know. And that's a perfectly fine result. Because in the end, if you don't have to spend money, you don't have to spend money. There you go. That's my
Agreed.
opinion. So if he wants to narrow things down to just two other speaker brands in addition to his current clip speakers, what brands would we recommend for him to try out? SVS and Aperion. Done.
I would free two-way shipping. So
I would love to say a bunch of other
yes, because we could say Ascend, we could say RBH for sure.
I would love to, and I think you would enjoy any of these speakers. I think you would, but maybe you won't. And I know with Ascend and SVS, you can send them back for free. And that's the number thing. Aperion, I'm sorry. Aperion.
Ascend charges shipping.
I honestly, if I were you, I would just bring in SVS. I don't necessarily think
the other one I would say is almost anywhere. Like if you have a Best Buy or even any other big box store, you can probably find some KEF.
Yes, that would be a good one too.
Yeah,
yes.
And that's like a store. So rather than it being online shopping and dealing with shipping in between, if you have just about any store around you, you can probably find some KEF Q series speakers, and that you could do as a store. You purchase and return.
Yes, that's the only reason I would recommend those.
Yeah.
If you can do if you can do free shipping 2 ways, or if you don't mind paying the shipping, then Ascend would be a good option.
Absolutely.
RBH would be a good option. These are all good options. I don't want to say this name, but I guess I have to. Gur is cute. I guess Gur.
It was a handle. I have no name that was signed. This is all I have to identify this person. Gur is cute.
We're going to GIRR. Going
That's
with
right.
Gur. Gur has a basement home theater with a 7.1.4 speaker configuration using KEF Q150 speakers. I guess all the way around for everything.
They sure look like it. Yeah, it looks like it in the photos.
Oh, I haven't got scrolled down that far yet. The receiver is a Denon X3700H, and they have an Adcom 5500 2-channel amp, which is 200 watts a channel, as well as an Adcom 5503, which is 3-channel amp, which is also 200 watts a channel already on hand. They have purchased recently a Navy equipment rack, and they're wondering if it would be worth using both Adcom external amplifiers to power 5 of the 7 floor-level speakers. At least 2 channels of external amplification are necessary since it then only has 9 amps built in. But it makes sense to use the Adcom 5503 to power the front, left, center, and right, while the Denon handles everything else. Would somehow be better to use only the 2-channel 5500, not the 5503 at all? Or would it be beneficial and worth taking up all that rack space to use both Adcom amps? The master volume pretty much never goes above -10. There are some pictures of the room to give a very rough idea of the size and distances. The new AV rack is not shown, as these are older photos. They've got some room treatments. The room's all black. And indeed, they have the same speaker all the way around. So,
sure looks like it. And this does not look like a tremendously large room. We don't know for sure that it isn't open to other parts of the basement. We can't see that it's fully enclosed, but we're mostly concerned with the distance from the speakers to the seats, and those are short distances. All the way around.
You need 2 channels anyways.
You need 2 channels anyway.
So most people would say, I think most people would say, go ahead and use the 3-channel amp up front and get all 3 of them. You've already got it on hand. I don't know what your financial situation is or why you're asking this question. Maybe I'll figure that out through reading the rest of this. But if you're like, I want to sell one of these, and I need to get as much money back as possible because I'm trying to buy this, I think you would be perfectly fine using the 2-channel and having the Denon power the center. I don't think there would be a tonal mismatch because you have done that. I also think you could sell both of them and then get a
little Fosse amp to just power one pair of the overheads or something like that.
You would be fine with that.
Yeah, this is not a setup that should be taxing that Denon receiver at all. These distances are short. The speakers are not weirdly inefficient or something like that. I any of these scenarios would do. I do not think it is worth taking up the rack space and the amount of heat thrown off by plugging in both of those external Adcom amplifiers. I wouldn't do that. So yeah, if this isn't a matter of price or anything like that, and you want to use these Adcoms for something and you don't want to, do any hassle with selling and buying, then I would probably just plug in the 3-channel one, of course, and do the front 3 speakers. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. Certainly nothing wrong with doing that.
It's just a complete and total waste. I mean, you're not getting anything out of it.
There's really no way I'd be using both Adcoms and taking up all that rack space and all the heat generated. Yeah.
So they've been told that those Adcom amps can draw serious amounts of power, and it would be best to plug them into a separate dedicated electrical circuit. Let's just stop right there for a second and say, theoretically, okay?
It is not literally impossible for that statement to be true.
Yes, this is if you run the numbers on many outlets in your house, or a theoretical house, this could be true.
Sure.
Okay, but with certain conditions being met.
Yeah.
I am going to tell you right now, those conditions in your home theater will never be met.
No.
So
you're never going to be doing a full power draw on that amplifier in the setup that you have shown us in these photos.
If you turned it to reference volume, you're still not getting there.
Yeah.
So they're using a Panamax M5300EX power filter in the AV rack for power protection. It has 11 sockets. 2 of them are labeled as high current and spec'd for the full 15 amps from the wall outlet. Then the 9 sockets are spec'd for 12 amps. The M5300EX has voltage monitoring. It will shut the power off if the voltage from the wall drops below 90 volts or goes above 142 volts, but it does not provide voltage regulation or any sort of battery backup. What would happen if they plugged in both Adcom amps? You're never going to, but go on.
No.
The Denon receiver and the HSU VTF 15 Mark 2 sub, a Blu-ray player, and an NVIDIA Shield Pro. With having all of those plugged into the single Panamax unit cause issues. The TV isn't plugged into the Panamax, which is probably it should be, but Gur is pretty sure that it's the same circuit breaker at the back panel. Or breaker back at the panel. So that would be drawing power from the same circuit too. Is that problematic? I would be more concerned about plugging your subwoofer into this than anything else.
Okay.
And the reason is sometimes these subwoofer amps get in kind of power wars with power conditioners. You don't have power regulation here.
There's no voltage regulation or battery, so that shouldn't be an issue in this case. No.
But subwoofers have their own protection circuitry for the most part. They have fuses. They have things that protect them from these sorts of problems. So I would plug your subwoofer directly into the wall, first of all. Okay. Full stop. The rest of it, there is no world in which I think you're ever drawing enough power that even plugging it into the 12 amp one is going to be
That's true. I mean, so if I like Tom's advice, if you put the subwoofer directly into a wall outlet, now you can use the 2 high current outlets for the AV receiver and one of the ADCOM amplifiers. There's no problem there. Obviously, the source devices are negligible in this calculation, and the TV could get plugged into the Panamax too, or also into the wall outlet. Yeah, you're never going to be using more than like 30 watts total in amplifier power. It's just not going to happen in this room. So there's really no problem doing that.
Yeah. So prior to getting the Denon X3700H, they were using an Yamaha Avantage A780 receiver, and they didn't have any acoustic treatments in the room. The 8 acoustic panels got added at the same time as the Denon. They used to have a clap echo, so the 8 panels definitely did something, but Gur used felt fabric as a covering, another questioning if it was acoustically transparent enough. Things used to sound clearer without the panels, and with the Yamaha receiver, the center sounds especially muted now. But what's to blame? What's the fix? He was using felt as a covering simply wrong, and it basically negated the effort of trying to acoustically treat the room in a more general way. Depending on how acoustically not transparent it is, it can be. You can definitely have negated parts of it. Like the high-end frequencies are now bouncing off, which could be part of your problem with your center channel is sounding weird because you just basically still have a reflective surface in there.
Right.
And then how not acoustically transparent it is will affect lower and lower frequencies. So if bass waves are still going in, the lower waves are still being affected.
Although none of these panels look thick enough that they're bass traps. So
but they're probably doing something, and I don't know what kind of felt he used, I mean, it could be, or velvet or whatever he said it was.
Felt.
Yeah. So it's not a huge problem. I mean, I don't know. I'm not the one doing it, but it shouldn't be a huge deal to just refinish these things with speaker girl cloth or something acoustically transparent.
Yeah. Any of the fabrics that you could buy, the DIY supplies from Gik or from Acoustimac, especially Acoustimac. Like if you kind of went for the look of felt, like that was a big part of the decision, then maybe the acoustically transparent suede that Acoustimac sells would be really appealing to you because it could give you a pretty similar look while being relatively acoustically transparent. And we know that even the acoustically transparent suede that Acoustimac sells is not completely acoustically transparent. It does, reflect some of the high frequencies a bit more. So, I mean, let's go to the hypothetical scenario of you built some insulation-based acoustic panels and then you just put like solid paper on the front as the covering, right? Like what's going on there? Why might that impact your sound? I mean, it will now be producing pretty uneven reductions as far as what that acoustic panel is doing. It's just acting as a reflector for the high frequencies, and then some of that like lower treble upper mid range is now being absorbed where it didn't used to be before when you didn't have any panels whatsoever. And then unless the panels are significantly thick, the bass isn't actually being treated at all. That could have the effect of now you've almost created a bit of a passive V-notch shape. Like you've almost done a U-shaped or V-shaped EQ curve, which could definitely make voices sound more recessed than they used to. If you just did that on an equalizer and you boosted up the treble and you boosted up the bass and you cut down the mid-range, it could definitely make voices sound recessed. So it's not out of the realm of possibility if you use some pretty not acoustically transparent felt whatsoever, that you've kind of created that V-notch pattern similar to if you just put a solid surface on the front of your acoustic panels. Yeah, I think that's a possibility. I would probably, I mean, one thing I would try is just taking your panels down, although they do look fairly solidly affixed to the walls with the hardware that was used, so that might not be the easiest thing. But I might try taking the panels down and having a listen, because that should get you to where, you know, it was the AV receivers that were swapped. Now we're back to the room being untreated, because it's not out of the realm of possibility that something that went on with the room correction also went, you know, astray in having run Odyssey, and that made a weird change versus what you had before. So, and if you do that, if you're basically like, okay, I took the panels down, I reran Odyssey now, and now it sounds as clear as it ever did, well, then we know, okay, those panels really are doing something deleterious to your sound, and it would be time to refinish them. That's just a way to confirm for yourself.
I don't know that I would go through all that. I know. You know, you could actually just, I mean, I know you can see the L brackets where they're attached to the wall.
Yeah.
On here. They are pretty well up there.
I know.
And that's a shame, because it's going to take a bit to get them down. You could just cut off the current fabric and then as they're on the wall, I mean, it's not going to look great, but you could do that and just do what I tell people when they're like, I don't like seeing wires. Turn off the frickin' lights. Who cares what it looks like in the dark?
I mean, yeah, they've got exposed ceiling joists in here, so we know that some exposed wires is not the end of the world. So
what would we recommend? Where would we recommend buying additional AV rack shelves and mounts? The official ones that match the rack they got are all over $40, and it adds up quick. Go ahead, Rob. Okay.
B&H Photo. B&H Photo has a wide variety of both brand and generic AV racks. Thankfully, if you've got a pretty standardized AV rack, then even generic shelves and ear mounts and all that will work just fine. They got plenty that are under $20. So while it's obviously not free, it's going to cost you something to buy them. You can get lower prices for shelves and for ear mounts and all those types of things. So yeah, B&H Photo is great for doing that.
Or you can just buy shelves and get rid of those adcoms and use a Fosse amp and call it good. I think I'd do that in a minute. All right, who do we have left, Rob? Because I'm
okay
not
on the
long.
list. We still have Mike and wait, did I scroll past the name? I know there's a second one on
there
here.
Is a second one.
Did. There's Sean. Mike and Sean. You're on the list for next week.
All right, if we want to thank our listeners of the week, become a listener of the week, support the podcast some way, and go to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, or go to patreon.com/avrant podcast and become one of our 132 patrons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So 132 patrons over there. Thank you very much for your financial support.
I just want to thank Aaron for sending a movie code that didn't work for Rob to test out for him. Thank you very much, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, it is being educational, finding all these weird little quirks up here in Canada that we've got with these movie codes.
And thanks for the notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from Aaron, Mike, Casey, and Bill. Thank you for thanking us.
Yes, indeed. I'll say those names one last time. Aaron, Mike, Casey, and Bill, thank you very much for your notes of gratitude and encouragement. We super duper appreciate it. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Antry.
I put up the question thing because I thought you were going to say, send your questions to question@avrant.com. But now we're back and you already said the sign off. So I will say, I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AV Rant.
Now go out and listen to something.